This is Chippy today talking about renewable energy and what Labor plans to do with it as, I guess, an election promise.
Let's moving along. So coming back to renewable energy, the government is significantly accelerating progress on new wind and solar farms to generate more of our power generation. I'm announcing today that there are new wind farm projects, 3 new wind farm projects that have been approved for fast track consenting. They would cut around 150 million kilograms of carbon emissions and create up to 840 construction jobs in the Manawatu, Waiuku, near Auckland, and in Southland. Combined, they would generate about 419 megawatts of electricity at peak output. That's about the same as New Zealand's 3rd largest hydroelectric dam, the Clyde Dam. New Zealand's increasingly well positioned globally to harness wind power onshore and offshore. When it comes to offshore generation, for example, our location in New Zealand matters. The least windy sites here...
Look at the smirk on this. He likes this fact. You know, it's like Dad's got his one fact. You watch this one, the least windy site here. He likes this fact, does Chippy?
In New Zealand are considered to have better wind energy potential than the windiest sites in Australia.
Hey, he
this
likes
means
that one.
That we've got amazing opportunities right here at our fingertips, and we're determined to make the most of those. But it's not just wind power that we want to make more progress on. We're also fast-tracking solar energy projects, with nearly 2 million solar panels already sped up through the consenting process. That's part of 9 solar farm projects which have been fast-track referred to expert consenting panels since 2021. If all of those are approved, they could add 1.87 million solar panels to the national total and generate 1,147 megawatts of energy at peak output. Again, tying that back to the Clyde Dam, that's almost 3 times the power output of the Clyde Dam. When you put those things together, the fast-track solar and the wind projects, along with geothermal projects that have also been referred using fast-track consenting, they could create about 3,500 construction jobs nationwide and employ more than 350 full-time staff when they're completed.
There you go. There's the announcement, Chewy. I want to actually go to some commentary from Lloyd Burr in a second. But first of all, what are your thoughts?
I think it's... I mean, you just can't knock any sort of project for more clean electricity generation. It's a common pushback when people bring up the transition to EVs as an example, that there isn't enough generation potential in New Zealand to support that. So anything that involves spinning that up, the stat of like 3 more Clyde dams is impressive. I still think they're missing a trick in that there isn't some sort of subsidy for micro generation solar panels on people's rooftops. I think Australia is much better at that than we are.
So let's explain that. Are you saying I have solar panels on my roof that are feeding back into the grid? I get some kind of return for that? Is that what you're talking about?
No, I'm talking like, some sort of government subsidy or long-term payback, zero interest loan for people to get solar panels on their roof.
Right.
Because you win either way. They're either feeding power back into the grid or they're removing their drain on the grid.
Yeah, so both ways.
And it from a resilience point of view, I really like that as well. But there has been, like, to the best of my knowledge, zero mention of that being a focus at all.
Right.
So, but yeah, big project.
I think it's great. I think it's great. I think anything like this that we can add to. And look, the other thing is every country in the world is going to need more power to be generated when we turn more to electric cars. Like if tomorrow every single household in the country had an EV, we'd be fucked with our power consumption and the power that we're producing. So we need to figure out a way to generate more power. I mean, if we can do wind and solar, if that's the best way to do it we're pretty good hydro here in New Zealand. Geothermal in the middle of the North Island's pretty good as well. But wind seems to be, and yeah, there are some questions around what it does to the environment, what it does to birds and stuff like that. So that's got to be a part of the conversation. But the reality is, if we have to have more capacity for generating power, how are we going to do it? Is the best option of a bad lot wind and solar? I mean, is solar the best option and then wind and then everyone's got their own little power on their roof? I'm not sure. But at least, I mean, you can't really complain also about 3,000 jobs. How can you? You know?
Yeah. And I mean, I'd have to look further into this, but I mean, I was under the impression that there was already a lot of consents that had been given
Yep.
for wind farms.
Yep.
And it was just a case of like, okay, well, we gave the consent. Who's doing the work? And everybody's like, we'll get around to it.
Well,
So
this is probably a good time to jump into the commentary from Lloyd Burr, who's a part of News Hub now. He obviously Today FM all shut down, but then he's been picked up again by News Hub, and he has written this: the government is announcing a massive if. Their press release used phrases like if approved, could generate, could create. There's every chance the expert consenting panels may decline then. There's every chance the expert consenting panels may decline then, in which case the government has just announced a whole lot of nothing. Don't get me wrong, I want these projects to go ahead. I want New Zealand to be 100% renewable by 2030, but I don't want to be led up the garden path with pre-election announcements that aren't worthy of an announcement because they might not actually happen. Well, I guess, but I mean, in defence of all political parties, nothing they say pre-election might happen. I mean, everything that ACT and National are announcing right now, if we were going to go by they might not actually happen, then they should be announcing nothing because they may not be government, which means none of those things will be happening. So if this is the metric for making an announcement that it has to be in 100% of surety, then no political party would ever announce anything. Because even if Labour announces something and they have a partnership with the Greens and the Greens say no, then it's not happening. So I think that's a little bit naive of Lloyd. He goes on to say, Prime Minister Chris Hipkins rebuffed these criticisms by saying the government always announced roading projects before they were consented. These aren't public roading projects, though. These are private enterprises with private capital that will happen mostly on private land. They are not comparable. So next time, maybe wait until these types of projects have resource consents before announcing them, their environmental benefits, their economic benefits, and how they'll contribute to achieving the ambitious 2030 goal. There's every chance they will get consent, but there's every chance they won't. Don't count your chickens before they're hatched. What are your thoughts? There's a little bit negative Nancy there, or fear? I mean, like I said, I think if the metric was don't make any announcement until you have 100% surety on it, then no party would make any announcement.
Yeah. No, I think overall that commentary is fair. Like, there's some bits that I'm like, nah. There's some bits that I think are really bang on the money. It is a weird announcement. Like, it's kind of like it's an easy win, and then you scratch it, and it's just like, okay, maybe not. You know,
How much of this is just playing politics as well? How much of this is Chippy saying the right thing pre-election doesn't really mean anything?
And I mean, this is the whole thing on relying on private companies, right? Is you can give them the green light. You know, we've made this as easy as possible. You are going to build them, right? And then they'll go, well, economic situation's not great. You know, we're just going to hold off on it for a while. And then the government's left holding the key and going, well, we kind of made a big thing out of this, and we really actually want you to do it. But we can't make you. So I guess we'll just go kick rocks.
Yeah. I don't know. People in the chat seem to be kind of saying it's a bit of a nothing in general. Simon says, I don't know why we haven't been given subsidies to people to have solar panels.
It seems to be a real gap. Like if it was something that was, you know, when they're bringing in the subsidies on EVs, it kind of made sense then to sort of go, actually, we're going to make the country more resilient. We're going to make this easier. EVs and micro generation kind of go hand in hand.
Yeah. Guru says community battery banks with local solar generation feeding and taking from the national grid. Peter says, I flew over new subdivisions on Saturday and noticed a lot of black roofs, but sadly, fuck all solar panels.
Now that again, that's something else that the government could do, of saying, well, every new build needs X percentage of solar panels, you know? And it's just trying to stay ahead of the curve rather than just doing what we usually do, which is just wait until it's a crisis and then freak out about it.
I also wonder about people building new houses. I've never built a house, but I've always thought if I ever build a house, I'd do a few things. One of the things I'd like solar panels. The other thing is I'd probably dump some one or two rainwater tanks into the ground. Even if I was on town supply, I'd still have them there as a backup or whatever. And for the extra couple of % investment to a house build, why doesn't everybody do it? Let alone what you're saying, which is you could regulate it. You could figure out a way to make it a part of a new building consent pretty easily.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, we're a country that is prone to reasonably devastating disasters. On the East Coast, I one of the channels that I follow was like covering the fact that someone was powering their house and their neighbors, supplying electricity to their neighbors from their electric car in reverse.
Right. Yeah.
And that sort of thing. Like essentially, it just becomes a great big battery, and it's those sort of things that are like, wow, shit. If we have something like that, and there is 30-40% of communities have access to solar, well then that's a big problem solved, right?
Yeah.
We're worried about the capacity of the grid for an electrified cars. This is a way that we could do it, and we're not relying on X company to follow through with their consents and then the objection process because someone doesn't like a wind farm in their eye line or on their neighbor's farm or something like that. It's just, it's I get the appeal of announcing a big project, but sometimes you can get those same gains or benefits in a smaller way.
J Transform says, why not?
This is one of my favorite topics. Yes,
nuclear. I can't say that word. Nuclear. How do you say it? How do you say
well,
it?
I think both ways are fine.
It's because I get caught up in the American system where Bush was always criticized of saying nuclear. Nuclear.
It's nucleus.
It's one of those words for me.
Nuclear. I've always said nuclear. But
the tech is much more advanced. Honestly, our stance on nuclear could be holding us back. Just have a no nuclear warheads / weaponry policy. There's a guy called Patrick Moore who used to be quite high up in Greenpeace, I believe, and he got on the wrong side of the green community when he came out, probably 20 years ago, and basically made the stance that, if we're being honest, the only real way around getting off fossil fuels when it comes to power and stuff is to get into nuclear power. It's cleaner, etc. Obviously, when it goes wrong like nothing else. But I guess his position was the risk factor for it going wrong versus the reward for, not my position, but his position of being cleaner, I guess. Was something that he was pushing for a while, and obviously got him kicked out of the boat for quite a long while.
I got to say, I'm not a big fan of it. Being a very geologically active country, I don't think it necessarily gels in a good way. Japan has managed it mostly fine. Fukushima, maybe we want to have a wee think about that. If I was a place like Finland, I'd be going, yeah, sure, we don't have earthquakes. Everything's made of granite. We just bury this in an old salt mine and forget about it.
Yeah.
Sure. But I think because of our isolation, because we have so little involved in I guess not so much the technology, but the knowledge involved in spinning up nuclear reactors and stuff like that.
Yeah.
You have to train the people. You have to train them to a really high level. We don't really do that. My whole thing is like, if anybody in our area is going to do it, why hasn't Australia? They have one reactor. And I think it's a research one.
Right.
But they have their own uranium. It's like, I would have thought Australia would have gone, yep, we're building 15 nuclear reactors. Go for it. We could just stretch an extension cable across the Tasman Sea. We'd be fine.
Let me read this, because I wanted to make sure I had the information right on Patrick Moore. So this is Patrick Moore. Dun, 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 dun. There he is there. 76 years old. A Canadian industry consultant, former activist, early member and past president of Greenpeace Canada. This is his this is not pre-set up, so I'm just reading this out for the first time. Moore was opposed to nuclear power in the 1970s. He believed that nuclear energy was synonymous with nuclear holocaust and everything nuclear was evil, but has since come to be in favour of it. Moore co-chaired the Clean and Safe Energy Coalition, which was supported by the Nuclear Energy Institution, a national organisation pro-nuclear industries. In 2009, as a co-chair of the coalition, he suggested that the mainstream media and environmentalism movement are not as opposed to nuclear energy as in decades past. He argues that any realistic plan to reduce reliance on fossil fuels or greenhouse gas emissions would require an increased use of nuclear energy to supply baseload power. He also criticised the cost and reliability of wind farms. So I'm not saying he's the be-all and end-all, but there is a perspective out there for nuclear that comes from some people who have been around the sort of green energy field for quite a long time. Whether it's right, wrong, or indifferent, I don't know, but just putting it out there.
Yeah, it's a really interesting argument that I'd love to rip into. I don't think it's wrong for all countries. I think if you can manage the risks, then sure, it's certainly better than having a coal-fired or oil-fired power plant. Absolutely.
A very good point you've made though about the nature, the shaky nature of these isles.
Yeah, absolutely. Are we going to be chucking our nuclear waste in the Southern Alps and hoping for the best? And then something cracks the whole country open. I don't know.
Huntley.
Yeah.
Put him in Huntley.
Yeah. But yeah. I think, an island nation, we have tides, we have wind, we have lakes, we have geothermal. I don't think we really need it.
Yeah.
I would have to say, hey, look, every house in the country has solar panels now, and we've run out of space for wind farms. We need another option. And I'll go, yeah, okay, maybe a nuclear reactor there, and it can sit just outside Auckland.
There is, I wonder about Tesla solar panels. I don't know. I forget his name. He's like the world's highest profile tech guy, MK Marquez Brownlee. I haven't watched this clip yet, but Tesla solar roof review, was it worth it? I'll have a look at that in the next day or so and report back on it. So he spent a year, I think, living with Tesla solar panels, and then he'll have the new solar panels are a Tesla owner's dream. See, I don't know.
Yeah, they're pretty crazy. They replaced their whole roof with special solar panels.
Yeah,
that are basically roof tiles.
Yeah.
It's a really clever idea.
Yeah.
I haven't really looked into it more than that, but yeah. I mean, when my place needs a new roof, solar is going to be part of that.
Cool. Very good. Interesting that once you kind of start setting up your house like that, you probably never want to leave, eh? Because until that becomes industry standard, if you set up your house to be sort of this little bastion of solar energy and comfort, you're never going to leave, are you? Because you have to go somewhere else and do it all over again.
I mean, I've been wanting to knock on one of my neighbours' doors because I walk past his place all the time, and he's got I think 8 or 9 solar panels and a little Nissan Leaf in there, and right. I'm like, if he has, and I assume he must have batteries, but yeah, if you're charging your house batteries during the day and then using them to charge your Leaf at night, and then you're just driving around on that, you're literally driving around for free.
Yeah,
so
bar the investment for the solar panels and batteries, but yeah, from there on.
Yeah, but you're not paying fuel that pays off quicker. It's just a little cheap Leaf.